Srimati Archana padiyar. She is great Acharya of spirituality, experienced yoga teacher. She graduated BSc Zoology, postgraduate diploma in systems management. She completed yoga teacher training course. She also completed Antaranga Sadhana. She underwent Vedanta studies at the holy feet of Pujya Swami Durgeshananda Ji, Her Holiness Pujya Swamini Anaghananda Ji. She was formally inducted as a Bhagavad Gita teacher by Her Holiness Pujya Swamini Anaghananda Ji. Please welcome Madam.
Thank you very much, Jayanti ma'am, as always. And namaskaram to all of you. Very glad to be here with all of you today. So I shall start my talk today. So we are on the eve of Independence Day, and the topic is freedom from disease. So the topic that I have chosen is anasakti, that is non-attachment and freedom. Let me start right away with a small incident from the freedom struggle. So Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was arguing a case in the court when a telegram was delivered to him, and he read it, he folded it, he put it back in his pocket, he continued with his arguments, and then he went back home to his dead wife. The telegram had borne the news of his wife's death. How was this individual able to withstand such a shock so calmly and continue with the arguments in court is the question. Likewise, there were millions of freedom fighters more than 75 years ago who were beaten, who were jailed, who were tortured, who were starved. And if you go to the cellular jails in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, you will see the modes of torture, implements that were used to torture these freedom fighters. And despite all this tremendous suffering, they struggled on continuously until India secured her freedom 75 years ago. So this again begs the question, how were these ordinary people like you and me, how were they able to endure such great suffering? And how were they able to endure this tremendous suffering with equanimity and strength, with calmness and strength? So the question is then, the bigger question is, what is it that enables individuals to confront difficult life events even without being emotionally disturbed? What is it? So that is what we are going to explore today and understand what that particular facet is and what is its value to us and how does it affect our health? What is the implication of that particular facet that is important for our health? So a simple answer to this question, which is actually pretty common sense if you actually look at it that way. The question is that, what is it that enables individuals to confront difficult life events without being emotionally disturbed? So the very simple answer for that is, when one discovers a higher I, a higher self, the lower I and the lower self with all its problems appears small and insignificant. Right? So let me illustrate. What does it mean? So say, for instance, if we are looking at the freedom fighters, if we're looking at Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, what does it mean? That the freedom fighters had discovered a higher, expanded ideological identity. I am Indian. They were no doubt individuals like Ram or Sham or Gita or Dhanya or Purnima or Veena, ordinary individuals. But what had happened was they had discovered a higher and expanded ideological identity. I am Indian. And from this expanded identity, they found the greatest inspiration to struggle for freedom incessantly. They had discovered something far superior, in the face of which their personal suffering, whether it is a suffering of their family which may not have had income, whether it is their physical suffering, that personal suffering was small and insignificant in the face of something far superior, which was the I am Indian identity. So this attitude, right, is something that beautifully exemplifies the doctrine of Anasakti. The doctrine of Anasakti is beautifully exemplified by these examples. So let us understand what is this doctrine of Anasakti. So an approximate English translation for Anasakti would be non-attachment. If you look at the dictionary, that is one of the meanings that will come up. Now, this word, though it seems like a simple word, non-attachment, it carries very deep meaning and very great connotations. In fact, this concept or doctrine of Anasakti is extolled in all the Indian scriptures. You will see it in the Upanishads, you will see it in the Vedas, in the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras, in the Ramayana, in the Mahabharata, all these. In the Bhagavad Mahapuran, you will see this entire concept of non-attachment, and this, or what we call Anasakti. But the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita is the Bhagavad Gita, in fact, can be considered a teaching of 700 verses on Anasakti. In one way, it can be seen like that. And it has expounded the concept of Anasakti with total thoroughness, unlike any other text anywhere in the world. That is the greatness of the Bhagavad Gita. In all its ramifications and complexities, Anasakti has been totally discussed. So much so that Mahatma Gandhi was inspired, Mahatma Gandhi, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and many other stalwarts of the freedom, Lokmanya Tilak, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, they were inspired by the Bhagavad Gita, and Mahatma Gandhi went on to write a book on the Gita that is called the Anasakti Yoga, the Yoga of Non-Attachment, where he talks about this. So you see that clearly Anasakti was a very important doctrine that shaped the freedom struggle. We must not forget this. Now, what does the Bhagavad Gita say? The Bhagavad Gita says that for ordinary people like Arjuna and for you and me, leave alone the great leaders, for ordinary people like us, if we practice non-attachment, it is possible for us to attain very stable states of mind and a deep sense of fulfillment, even whilst we are living in the world and going around our daily activities. Right? That is the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita. And that is why this teaching of Anasakti, which won us freedom, is also relevant today for you and me, even though we may be ordinary people going on in our ordinary lives. In fact, it is relevant for anybody at any stage of life, anywhere in the world. Now, there are many misconceptions that are regarding non-attachment and Anasakti. So some of the common misconceptions are a kind of an apathy, apathetic attitude, not interested in life, or it could be inaction. Some people think that it is a carelessness and insensitivity and a carelessness, a don't care attitude about work, a shirking of responsibilities. These are the very common myths and the common misunderstandings of Anasakti. What we need to understand very carefully is that Anasakti is a negative concept, no doubt. Non-attachment is a negative concept, but it has got a positive content. What does that mean? By detaching from something lower, you manifest something higher. Like we said before, you expand, you discover the higher identity, you transcend the lower identity and you discover a higher identity. Likewise, by detaching from the lower, you manifest the higher. What does this mean? This is something we have to see. So we will understand the concept of Anasakti with two facets. There are more facets to it. It's a small presentation today, so we cannot go into detail. I will take up only two primary concepts based on the freedom struggle and related to modern research that has been done in India and in the Western world, modern empirical research on detachment and anasakti with proper empirical data, with an anasakti scale has been created. People have been assessed on an anasakti scale, and there is very clear empirical data on what is the advantage of anasakti and the disadvantage of attachment. And the two of the characteristics they took is what I am going to be taking for our concept of anasakti, because we have to relate it to physical and mental health as well. So the concept of when we say we detach from something lower to manifest the higher, what does it mean? It means that we detach from the ego, this little I, this little person, this little self, and we expand our concept of self to the universal, to the infinite or the universal. So what does it mean? We feel spiritually oneness with others. We feel the pain, the suffering, the distress, the poverty, the sickness of other beings as if it were our own. So from this, we get one definition of anasakti, that is the anasakti is the non-attachment to the ego and egocentric desire. That is detaching from the ego and egocentric desire and expand into the universal. Now, from this expanded identity, I am Indian, I am Asian, I am human, I am a conscious being, I am a citizen of the world, I am the infinite. From this expanded identity, we participate in the world with a higher purpose. And we send selfless service and action, selfless action and service, they become central to the doctrine of anasakti. So anasakti is the detaching from the lower, expanding into the higher. We participate with an expanded identity, we participate in the world with a higher purpose, with selfless action and service. So basically, anasakti will translate into freedom from the sense of I, mine, I like, I dislike, I love, I hate, I am attracted, I am repulsed, and the freedom from selfish desire. So the first definition of anasakti is non-attachment, is freedom from ego and egocentric desire. Are you with me? Okay. Now we will go on to the second concept of anasakti, which is the non-attachment to the result of action. So we can understand anasakti in terms of action as well. Now that is nishkama karma, which we have studied in the Bhagavad Gita. That means one works for a higher purpose, free from personal motivations and preferences. We are totally devoted to the work on hand and free from attachment to the result of action. That does not mean we are indifferent to the results of action, but that only means we know what result is expected. We know what the means to the result are. We know our capacity for it. We work sincerely for it, but we are free from the hankering for results. So we do not waste any energy in the mental preoccupation, anxiety, fear, and worry and nervousness about the result or the outcome. So therefore, when one acts in the world for a higher purpose, with an expanded identity, with a higher purpose, free from personal motivations, free from the attachment to result, one is able to maintain emotional balance. This is how we can be balanced and stable individuals. And we will be able to maintain balance in success and failure, death and disease, in health and in illness, in birth and death, in gain and loss, in honor and dishonor. So when we act from a higher motive with an expanded identity, free from personal motivations, free from the attachment to results, the greatest fruit of that is this equanimity. emotional balance, and we are able to evaluate the causes of our failures better. That is a very practical advantage. So central or integral to the concept of anasakti or non-attachment to the results of results of action is total absorption in the task. It's called the flow state. For those of you who are familiar with positive psychology, the flow state, the performance excellence, mental stability and equanimity, these are all integral to anasakti or non-attachment. Anasakti or non-attachment, the two dimensions of it: detachment from the ego and egocentric desires, expansion into a larger identity, and the detachment from the fruits of action. These are the two principles of anasakti, which literally fueled the freedom movement and which has been tested today. If you want, for those of you, since most of you are therapists here, the research that you might want to refer to is Pandey and Naidu, Singh and Raina, Naidu and Roseman. This is the research that I have referred to. And they have utilized these concepts of anasakti and other concepts as well, these two concepts. Now, from anasakti, let us move to asakti, attachment, because we should know both. We should know the opposite as well, right? We cannot appreciate anasakti if we don't understand asakti. What does asakti mean? Asakti means, attachment means, it is like the monkey. The monkey has a tendency to cling on to something and to not let go of it. So attachment is compared equivalent to the monkey, a tendency to selfishly cling to a thing or a person or a being in order to possess it. The stronger the attachment, the greater the desire to protect and preserve. You see that? Attachment is the mother of several negative emotions. When our effort to bid to possess is thwarted, we express anger, hostility, and aggression, right? When our attachment to somebody or something is threatened, we experience agitation, distress, anxiety, fears, and worries. And when the object of attachment is lost, we experience grief, depression, and frustration. Very characteristic example is Dhritarashtra from the Mahabharata. His attachment was to the throne of Hastinapura. Clinging to power was the source of great evil, war, destruction, death, the death of all his 100 sons, and untold human suffering for him and for lakhs of people in those times. So this is what asakti, attachment, is the cause of much misery and suffering. This is what we need to understand. How is it relevant today? Now, consumerism, corruption, lust, grabbing, hoarding is all forms of attachment, asakti. And when we resort to consumerism, corruption, and grabbing and hoarding, we are also giving into attachment. Today, we are on the verge of environmental catastrophe. Our future generations are threatened. Our survival is threatened because of human greed born of attachment. We have ravaged the planet because of our greed and attachment. And that is why it is very important for us to address this issue of attachment. Let us look at the research on anasakti or non-attachment on well-being. Like I said, I have referred to some studies here, and I will briefly present the results before I conclude. Subjects or relationship between anasakti, non-attachment, and stress and health was studied by these three groups of researchers, and there are many more as well. Now, subjects, that is individuals who were low on anasakti, that means who had less of non-attachment, who had greater attachment. When they were confronted with difficult life events, they experienced those life events as threats. They experienced great stress and strain. They suffered from emotional instabilities. They were like insecurity, anxiety, fear, depression, guilt. And they had coping ineptitude. They were not able to cope with those difficult life events. They manifested more symptoms of psychological and physical ill health, and they also reported more daily aggravations in the mind and conflicts in their lives. So this is the effect of when we are low on anasakti, on attachment. It is characterized by higher threat perception, greater stress and strain, emotional instability, and an inability to cope with the problems of life, and greater anxiety and depression and fear psychosis, and greater daily problems. Now, on the other hand, subjects who are high on anasakti and non-attachment, when they were confronted with the same life events they were confronted, they evaluated the stressful event as meaningful and presenting a challenge and not a threat, and therefore they could develop a coping strategy, and they had experienced less stress and strain. They had emotional stability because of they had balance of mind. They experienced better physical and psychological health despite the exposure to all the stressors, and it was associated with clearly lower levels of depression and anxiety. To see that? So at a physical level and a psychological level, there's a tremendous difference between anasakti and asakti, right? So when we talk of stress is actually a subject. The stress response is a subjective response to a external event, right? Now what anasakti does is, anasakti has great value as a stress moderator. It moderates the stress, and therefore it enhances physical and psychological well-being. Now, most of the diseases today are psychosomatic, lifestyle, and stress is a big risk factor in many diseases. We can try all kinds of interventions, but if we do not adopt anasakti and other spiritual concepts as stress moderators, all the treatment will fall flat. You see, so the indigenous spiritual concepts like anasakti, they have great value as stress moderators, and they bring about, through the stress moderation, greater psychological and physical well-being. So I will conclude today's talk by saying that let us adopt anasakti, the philosophy of anasakti, as a way of life. And just as the Indian freedom fighters and stalwarts won independence 75 years ago with anasakti and non-attachment, today India and the world, we desperately need anasakti. We need to adopt anasakti as a philosophy and a way of life, so that we can gain freedom from stress, disease, and destruction. It is only through inner freedom from ego, egocentric desire, attachment, and selfishness, and negativities, that external freedom from external problems is possible. So therefore, anasakti, non-attachment, is freedom. Asakti, attachment, is mental slavery. The choice is yours. Jai Hind. Thank you very much.